Hi, my name is Casey and I'm from New York. And today I will be teaching a short lesson on equations and inequalities. So we'll start with equations. So in an equation we have an equal sign, and that means that both sides of the equal sign are equal to each other. So here let's start with problem number 1, which I've written down. And feel free to pause it here if you'd like to solve it on your own and then come back to doing it together. But the first step is we'll use the distributive property to simplify the parentheses on both sides of the equation. So we have 12x and then minus, so we're using the distributive property here, so minus 8 plus 6x equals, and then we have x, and then here again we're going to apply what's in the parentheses. We'll have 3 times 7, so 21 minus 18x. All right, and then our next step is to combine like terms on either side of the equal sign. So on the left side, we'll combine the 12x and the 6x to get 18x minus 8 equals, and then we'll get negative 17x plus 21. And then now we'll move the variables to one side and the constants to another. So now we'll get 35x equals 29, and then we will divide both sides by 35 to get the x alone, so we'll get x equals 29 over 35. And there we go, so we've solved the problem. All right, and then let's add a new whiteboard. And then let's do another way to solve another function, but this time we'll solve a quadratic equation by factoring. So let's start with the equation x squared minus x minus 6. And so we have the x squared, so that's what's making this quadratic equation. And so we're going to solve this one by factoring. So first, in order to factor, I like to think about it, so what two numbers would add up to -1 and multiply to get -6? So here we can write this down. So we have 2 and -3. So we have x squared plus 2x minus 3x minus 6 equals 0. So that was just expanding. This negative x is now 2x minus 3x. And then the next step is we can kind of factor this. So we'll have the x plus 2 and x minus 3 equals 0. And then we know that in order for this whole thing to equal 0, either x plus 2 equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0, so we can write that down. So x plus 2 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. Sorry about my handwriting. This is my first time trying to do this on an iPad, so it's a little bit messy. But all right, so here we see that x either equals -2 or x equals 3. So here we have solved for x. Alrighty, and then I'm just going to show you another way to solve this equation, but instead of factoring, we will use the quadratic formula. So here, let me just bring up a new whiteboard. There we go. Okay, and so we can write a quadratic equation in the formula of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And then the quadratic equation, in order to solve for x, you get x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And when I learned this, we learned a little song to go along with it, to Pop Goes the Weasel, which was x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And so I think it's kind of a fun way to remember it. So we can solve the same equation that we did earlier, but this time using the quadratic formula. So if we have that same equation, so we have x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. And then here, so a would equal 1. B is then negative 1. And then if you see that c equals negative 6. And do you see how this, our equation here now relates to kind of the standard form that we saw above? And now we can plug this into the quadratic formula. So we have x equals negative b. So negative b would then be 1 plus or minus the square root b squared, so negative 1 squared, so 1 minus 4 times a times c, and then all over 2 times a, so 2 times 1. And then we can solve for this. So we have 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus negative 24, because that's what we got when we got 4 times 1 times negative 6 all over 2. And then simplify, so we see that this is x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 2. We see the square root of 25 equals, so 1 plus or minus 5 over 2. So then we see that x equals 1 minus 5 over 2 equals negative 2, or x equals 1 plus 5 over 2 equals 3. So we again get the same result, that x equals either negative 2 or x equals 3. So those are two different ways to solve a quadratic equation. They're both very useful, but just they're kind of helpful tools, and you can see what the situation is and kind of go from there. All right, now I'm going to switch over and we can look at some inequalities. And so the way you solve for inequalities is very similar to the way you solve for equations, but instead of having an equal sign as you would for an equation, you have either a less than, or a greater than, or less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. And so one thing that I like to remember which way the sign faces is that, so you could have example 2 is greater than 1. So the sign faces the bigger number. So like kind of the mouth, if you think about the like greater than or less than sign as kind of a mouth, if you draw some teeth, it eats the bigger side. Just another kind of handy trick to have. And then when you are writing, if for example, A is, here we go. A is less than B. We are going to write this on a number line. Then we have B here. Then we have, for A is less than B, so you draw a circle over B, but it's not equal to B, and then go this direction with an arrow. If you have A is less than or equal to B, then you draw the line under, because so for A is less than or equal to B, then you can fill in the circle because A could be B. Alrighty, and then something else to remember is the difference is for inequalities, there are an infinite number of solutions. All right, and then I will just solve a quick problem for an inequality just to see how that's done. So here, say 8 is greater than 7x minus 3 plus 6x. So let's, again, we'll combine like terms on a side. 8 is greater than 13x minus 3. Then we'll get it so that all of the variables are on one side, all of the constants are on another side. So we'll get 11 is greater than 13x. Divide both sides by 13. 11 over 13 is greater than x. You could also write that as x is less than 11 over 13. And then one last thing just to think about when you are working with inequalities is if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you need to flip the direction of the inequality. So I'll just set up a new whiteboard. So here we have another problem. We have 3x plus 6 minus x is less than or equal to 0. Oh, whoops, all right. And then, so we'll just solve the same way. So combining like terms, negative 4x plus 6 less than or equal to 0, negative 4x is less than or equal to negative 6. Okay, so now we're going to divide both sides by negative 4. But here we see that we're dividing by a negative. So here we have x is greater than or equal to negative 6 over negative 4. We can just reduce this to x is greater than or equal to 3/2. And that's it. Good luck with the rest of your problems. I hope that this was helpful.